Good evening, it's Dave at All Things Important Reviews. Thanks for checking my channel out. Please smash that like button and please smash that subscribe button. This is a comparison review of two very popular and very cheap watches of Chinese manufacturers. These are homage watches to the Rolex Submariner, which is the most imitated and copied watch on the planet, and both these models pay really good tribute to the original. The one on the left is the San Martin Water Ghost, the SN017, and the one on the right is the Pagani design PD-1661, which is obviously the Kermit homage, and this is the Smurf homage, but they're basically homaging the same watch essentially. Let's start with the basics. Both of them are 40mm nominal, true to the original size of the Submariner that was present for I think 30 odd years. The latest one is technically 41mm, the one that came out in September 2020, but we'll talk about it later. They both have 20mm fully solid stainless steel bands. Both have ceramic bezels, both have sapphire crystals, both have stainless steel 316 cases, and they both have NH35, or I believe the NH38 movements inside them, which are automatic movements. The San Martin is 200-meter water resist. The Pagani is 100-meter water resist nominal, but the Pagani is a lot cheaper. This one goes anywhere between, depending on the deal you get, 150 quid to over 200 quid. Whereas the Pagani sits more like 70 to say 85 quid, again depending on the deal and depending on the seller and all this other stuff. So the San Martin is twice the price of the Pagani, and we're going to talk about that all later. So let's talk about the sizing. I've measured these because it would be more difficult to do whilst I'm holding them both. I've measured them prior to this video. Now, just looking there, they actually look very, very similar in thickness. But this is interesting. On the Paganis, for some reason, there is a significant amount of variance in the thickness of their watches. I don't know if that's because they're ordering the cases off different factories, different suppliers in China, or whatever it is they do. But this is a last year model. This is a 2020 model. Now this one is only 12mm thick, this model. Now the San Martin is actually 12.7mm. But interestingly, they both feel equally as slender and slim on the wrist. However, the new Pagani model, which is 2021 version, does not have the Explorer written on the dial, and this one is a bit thicker. This is about 12.8, 12.7mm. I've actually put this on a Jubilee style band just to have a bit of variety. You can buy these off Pagani for about 15 to 20 quid. So again, the real Submariner, talking about closeness to the real Submariner in terms of the thickness, the real Submariner, as the one that I've actually tried, that my mate has, that his one was about 12.3mm thick. It feels very, very slim and slender on the wrist, the real Submariner. That was the ceramic version that was produced from 2010 to 2020. The new one is, I believe, a tiny bit thicker. I think, again, I've seen some people, there is variance in the Rolex ones as well. Some of them are 12.3. I think I've seen the Dubai experts, yeah, about 12.5, something like that. So again, you know, it's very close on the thickness. If you're lucky enough to get one that's only 12mm thick, obviously the thinner you can get, really, the better it feels on the wrist, in my opinion, because obviously the thicker you get, the more heavier and top heavier it becomes. But so for that, I'm going to give it a draw, because it does not feel too thick. Or maybe I would give that a slight edge to Pagani for the thickness. The size, they're both approximately, and it is true, approximately 40.5 mil diameter. If you measure the bezels, lug to lug, they're both approximately 48 mil lug to lug, so that's obviously that dimension. However, end link to end link, the Pagani is about 3 to 4 mil bigger actually. If you measure end link to end link, the Pagani is actually 3 mil longer. It's about 53.5, whereas this is only about 50 mil. But again, it's interesting because the main difference in fit of this watch, the one on the left, is going to be the thickness of the bracelet links, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But sizing wise, on my wrist, I prefer the Pagani, and I believe the Pagani is closer approximately to the real Submariner, at least the one that was produced for 10 years. The absolute latest Rolex Submariner, I've never seen in person, and I'm not 100% sure what the exact specs are on that one, because they've upped the bracelet and they've upped the case and all this other stuff, so it's a bit different. But this one was obviously both models were obviously homaging the 2010 to 2020 Submariner, so that's why I'm comparing them to that. So for sizing, I personally prefer the Pagani, slight edge. Right, now let's talk about the dial and crystal. Both models have sapphire crystals, highly scratch resistant. You know, I've not put a scratch in any of my sapphires. They've been tested by other reviewers on the internet, and they have confirmed that they are sapphire. And I believe the Cyclops is sapphire on the San Martin too. Okay, so that's excellent. Now, in terms of the actual dials, in my opinion, the Pagani looks better, in my opinion, for two reasons. The branding is superior, and I prefer the Pagani Shield logo. I prefer the writing there. I like the fact, I mean, the problem with the San Martin for me is that the San Martin logo, the hexagon thing, looks a tiny bit childish, and it doesn't say San Martin or any other text on it. I don't like it too minimal. I like it a little bit busy. So I personally prefer the Pagani for that. Cyclops is, the one that's more clear is the San Martin. As you can see, I believe it looks almost like it doesn't really fit in the Pagani. However, I do not use the date windows. I don't use them. I don't set them. I don't care about them. I use my phone's time for that, date for that. So I just don't use them, I'm afraid. They both have sunburst dials, which I don't personally like on these models. I would prefer it if they both had a matte dial, or just a solid piano black, or a matte blue dial. But for some, which I'll show you the Chronos eventually, and I'll compare it to this one. The Chronos has a matte dial, and it's absolutely unbelievably beautiful. The Pagani has a kind of sunburst, very, very dark grey that comes through, even though it does look black normally, but just slightly a sunburst grey comes through. I would have preferred it if it was just jet black personally, but that's what they chose. I'm going to give it a draw on that one. But overall, I do prefer the actual look of the Pagani actually. Let's talk about bezels. I'll just show you the bezel action dead quickly. That's excellent bezel action on the San Martin. Hardly any back play on the Pagani. Now that feels really good as well. That is a lot easier to turn than the San Martin. There's a little bit of back play on that, but only a tiny bit. But that is far easier to turn. Now, I'm not a diver, believe it or not. I'm not a diver. Now, one thing I will say is that from a looks perspective, again, if you notice the indices and the Mercedes hands, they don't match on the San Martin with the colour of the markings on the bezel, whereas on the Pagani they match much better. So the Bezel Action is probably slightly better, very slightly better on the San Martin, but looks wise the Pagani wins in my opinion. The crown, I'm not going to start thinking it. Both crowns feel to me very similar. They both feel very good. You know, have no issue. Again, the Pagani, the San Martin have put they've put a shark on it. Now, I can see why, swimming, all that kind of thing, but the Pagani's branding is more consistent throughout, and they've put a shield on it, which is, you know, from a looks perspective, again, this is only opinion, I think it's better. Now, talk about the case back first, before we talk about the bracelet. Now, on the San Martin, they've chosen to be closer to the homage, because on a real Rolex, that's what you get. You get nothing on the back, unfortunately. There is nothing on there. It is completely plain. Now, when you're used to using Pagani watches, where they have these lovely little open case backs, it's so much more nicer to have that. It adds more detail to the watch. And it's got engravings on it, laser engravings of you know, stainless steel with a model number and the water resistance. And I think that really, I know they've tried to homage Rolex San Martin, but I think it should have something on it like this. I think this is far better, personally. I'm just trying to show you the sides of the watches to kind of give you a comparison of the curvature of the cases. The cases are quite similar, really, in terms of the actual curvature. Can you see how it very, very slightly curves up, very slightly on both of them? But the thickness is slightly thicker on the San Martin, on this particular unit. Now then, let's talk about bracelet. Now this is the meat and potato of the watch, because the bracelet makes or breaks a watch, in my opinion. Now, interestingly, the San Martin have chosen, and I don't know why they've chosen it, but they've chosen to put very chunky links throughout the whole bracelet. They both bracelets are nominal 20mm, and they both taper to, I believe, 16mm or approximately 16mm at the clasp from around 20, which is great because that's very similar to the real Rolex. Well, again, the latest one's 21mm, but we'll talk about that later. So, but they've chosen to put very thick 3.2 to 3.5mm thick links. I think they're about 3.2mm thick, whereas on the Pagani only the very, very end links would be thick, and even they're slightly less. I think they're only 3mm, and then they'd go to about 2.7mm. And you might think, well, that doesn't seem a lot, but when you put it on the wrist, it is a lot. It is a lot, and it affects the comfort of the watch. Can you see how the links are slimmer on the Pagani? Now that is closer to a real Rolex Submariner, because I've actually used a real Rolex Submariner, and the links are very similar to this, to about 2.8mm, something like that. Now what that means is it just adds a bit of weight and bulkiness to the watch. The screws on the San Martin are excellent, and they work even better than on the Pagani. The screws are absolutely fantastic, perfection. The screws, they go in, every single one works perfectly, no problem. Now clasps, now the San Martin has a heavy duty, you know, scissor double lock deployant clasp with push buttons, which is excellent. Machined excellently, that'll never come off your wrist, unless even, you know, it's got the safety catch. That is excellent. Look at how thick those swing arms are. Very thick swing arms. No diver's extension or no extension whatsoever. You just have 6 micro adjusts. All the clasp is milled and machined, very good. It functionally very good, but again, the issue with this bracelet and clasp is that overall, compared to the Pagani, it is not as comfortable overall. And in my honest opinion, this is a superior clasp in terms of comfort. Not in terms of the components that they've used, but I prefer a thinner and longer clasp like Rolex, because Rolex's clasps are similar to this. Now Rolex's clasps on their Submariners, they have a gliding lock system, which is not on this Pagani. But this does have a very functional extension there, and it's got, you know, the spring bar in there, and it's got the trigger system just like similar to a Rolex, and this trigger system is extremely functional and works perfectly well. You know, it may feel a little bit more rattly and a little bit less, you know, precise in terms of tolerances, but for comfort and for function, I believe it is a superior clasp, even though these are mass produced, you know, clasp, and I suppose this is a mass produced clasp as well. But I mean, for heavy duty and longevity, yeah, the San Martin bracelet and clasp is better. But two things: the edges of this, well, there's something on this clasp that would need a little bit of filing down. I think it's the edges there. And secondly, the edge of the bracelet on the San Martin on my unit and the edge of this case is too sharp. They should have rounded off the edge of this, and they should have rounded off all the edges on the bracelet. That would have made it comfier. Now I could do that, but it would mess up the polishing, and I'm not going to do it. But I could do it, and I could get it repolished, but I'm not going to do it because it'll cost too much money and I can't be bothered. Basically, I'm basically going to keep this watch, do the Chronos review and other things, and then I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to pick up the latest one with a gliding lock, but other people with a gliding style lock. But other people have commented that their version of it, San Martin's, is not working perfectly well. At least one guy who's picked it up has told me that. So anyway, so again, now on the Pagani, you know, even though there is a small edge there, you know, that you don't feel that on the wrist. It's extremely comfortable. This is one of the most comfortable 3-link oyster style bracelets that I've ever worn on this 12mm thick case. So with the, let me just switch him back around so that it's a fair comparison. So overall build quality and finishing, well, again, another thing I don't like about the San Martin is that the bracelet edges are not polished, whereas the bracelet edges are polished on the Pagani. So I prefer the bracelet and clasp on the Pagani, I do. I think that they need to drop this down to a more appropriate size thickness and upgrade the clasp. And any edge on the San Martin needs to be rounded off, in my opinion. It's not a big issue. You can wear it all day, as I do, but it is not as comfortable as this. So it all depends what you want. If you want kind of heavy duty, superior build quality in the sense of, you know, the thickness of the links and all that, and the heavy dutiness of the clasp and the water resistance, then get the San Martin. But if you just want an all-round, all-day beater, very comfortable watch, get the Pagani. They are both excellent watches, and I know I've picked on some things on the San Martin, but in my opinion they should have it at this price bracket, because this is nearly 2 times the price, if not more, than the Pagani. So some of these, and because the branding of the Pagani, even though it's a Chinese brand, the branding is better. The branding is on the clasp, it's on everything. You know, the branding is on the crown, on the thing, but the branding on this one is all over the shop. They've got the hexagon logo, they've got the shark logo there, and then on the clasp they've got San Martin. So I think this could be definitely be improved. But water resistance, again, water resistance is clearly superior on the San Martin, but are you ever going to use this really for diving? If you really was going to dive, you know, or scuba dive, you know, would you really pick up a Chinese watch, or would you pick up an actual certified one from Seiko or Casio or whatever, or would you use a dive computer? Because that's what all divers use nowadays, is proper dive computers, which looks like a mini tablet that's strapped to your wrist. So the San Martin, they are both excellent watches, and again, you know, the way they've done the dial, the sunburst, is really nice. It is nice still, but I personally prefer if it was a matte, and I would prefer it again on the Pagani. But it all depends on what you want. Are you bothered about that that water resistance not being as good on the Pagani? Are you bothered about the clasp and the not being as well machined in terms of the tolerances? Or do you just want something that you know for a fact will be comfortable and will get the job done still, but be a lot cheaper? That's completely up to you. It's your decision. There is affiliate links down below if you wanted to pick them up. I'd make a tiny bit of commission at no extra cost to you. But they're both excellent watches. If you do pick them up, you will not be disappointed with either of them. And if anything did catch your wrist in terms of the clasp, you could always file it down. I'm certain on this model it won't catch your wrist, because I've checked them all. And I've had about 5 different versions of this watch in different colours, and none of them have ever caught, you know, have had sharp stuff on them. They have had sharp stuff on the outside of it, but again, you can just put a file there and file it down. Okay, it's been a pretty long comparison, but you can see how much the bracelets mean to me, because I'm a bracelet guy. And I'll just show a wrist shot to show what they both look. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You can clearly see how much how narrower, or at least how it seems visually, and longer the Pagani clasp is. But they both fit excellently. That 40mm size is a sweet spot. Thanks for checking out my reviews. There's loads more coming. Cheers.